I want you to try a little thought experiment with me today.
Oh, starting with a thought experiment. I like it.
Yeah, well, just imagine, just for a second, that you are stepping into a virtual reality utopia.
Right, like a fully immersive space.
Exactly. You slip on your headset, you calibrate your controllers, and suddenly the physical world just, you know, completely melts away.
Drawn entirely.
Right. And you are instantly transported into this digital environment that has been engineered down to the very last pixel for pure, uninterrupted comfort.
So we are talking about spaces bathed in soft, forgiving pastel colors, right?
Oh, absolutely. Cozy virtual cafés where a gentle, low-fidelity rain just patters perpetually against the window panes.
Yeah, where the ambient audio is this mix of crackling fireplaces and muted lo-fi beats.
I mean, that sounds amazing, right? And the
Yeah.
people around you, everyone is inhabiting an avatar specifically designed to be wholesome, cute, and entirely non-threatening.
So you see oversized anime characters, fluffy animals, chibi mascots, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It is the ultimate digital sanctuary. It's a place where the friction of the real world just fundamentally does not exist.
It is essentially a collective architectural hug. I mean, when we look at the sociology of spaces like VRChat.
A collective hug. I like that phrasing.
Yeah, these environments like the meadow cafes, the rainy lo-fi rooms, they are purpose-built to act as a decompression chamber for the modern internet user.
Right, which makes total sense given how stressful the real world is.
Exactly. The entire social contract of these spaces is built entirely on approachability and softness.
It's a culture of digital head pats and cozy vibes, basically.
That is the perfect way to describe it.
But now, I want you to hold that image in your mind. And I want you to imagine a lone figure standing right in the middle of that exact same virtual universe.
Okay.
But this figure fundamentally, aggressively rejects every single aspect of that soft, cozy utopia.
Just a complete aesthetic rejection.
100%. Instead of hanging out in a pastel cafe, this user has opted to isolate himself in a burning, lag-heavy, apocalyptic war zone ripped straight out of a 2005 video game.
That is just such a massive pivot from lo-fi beats.
It really is. The sky above him is this bruised, oppressive purple. Alien vines are tearing through the shattered concrete all around him.
Wow.
And this player's just standing there, completely still, holding a low-poly military assault rifle.
It is a jarring, almost violent aesthetic collision when you put it like that.
It totally is.
We are looking at a user who has taken the concept of early 2000s internet edginess, polished it to a razor-sharp point, and is now actively weaponizing it against the modern, highly sanitized culture of the social internet.
Which brings us to the topic of our deep dive today. We have a massive stack of source material to get through.
And I mean massive, it's a really deep well.
Yeah, we are looking at narrative chronicles documenting his actual real-time virtual encounters.
Plus, we have harsh, academic-level critical essays written by other users analyzing his psychological behavior.
Right, and on top of that, we have deep lore background documents on the specific video games, anime, and media that he uses to construct his entire identity.
It's a goldmine of digital anthropology, really.
It is. So our mission today is to pull apart the psychology of virtual nonconformity.
Because we have to ask, what happens when someone is handed the godlike power to be absolutely anything in a world with zero physical boundaries?
Exactly. And they intentionally choose to be a rigidly defined, immovable, hostile object.
Assassinate.
We are going to explore this digital antihero, who is known to the community simply as EeveeFan05’s.
A great screen name for such an intense guy.
Yeah, and we're going to figure out how his hyper-aggressive identity forces all of us, including you listening right now, to question the unspoken rules of the digital worlds we inhabit.
To truly understand the psychology of EeveeFan05’, we cannot start with the avatar itself.
No. Where do we start then?
We have to start with the environment he has chosen as his fortress.
Okay, the geography of it all.
Yes, because in special computing and social VR, geography is destiny. Where you choose to stand dictates who you are inviting into your space.
That makes a lot of sense. And as we noted, the vast majority of users congregate in those highly optimized social hubs.
Right, places with neon lights or soft, warm shading. But the chronicles in our sources reveal that EeveeFan05 exclusively and stubbornly resides in a custom private instance of a map called Westopolis.
Okay, let's break this down because the specific choice of Westopolis is wild to me.
It is a very specific, very deliberate choice.
Yeah, because for anyone who didn't play a very specific era of gaming, Westopolis isn't just some random ruined city asset flip.
No, not at all.
It is the iconic opening stage of the 2005 video game Shadow the Hedgehog.
Which is a game infamous for its incredibly dark, edgy tonal shift.
Exactly, and our deep lore sources go into incredible detail about what this place actually looks and feels like in VR.
It is the furthest thing from a bouncy, fun video game level.
Oh, entirely. The sky is this heavy, oppressive tapestry of deep orange and gloomy purple.
Yeah, the atmosphere is literally choked by the perpetual haze of simulated combustion.
You look around, and there are ruined concrete skyscrapers with their skeletal iron rebar completely exposed to the elements.
And then there are wrecked GUN military tanks half buried in the shattered asphalt.
Wait, remind me, GUN is the human military faction in the Sonic lore, right?
Yes, exactly. They are the human military faction. And on top of that, there are these thick, black, organic vines from an alien species called the black arms erupting right through the pavement.
Oh, right. And the sources say those vines are pulsing with this toxic violet bioluminescence.
Yeah, it's an incredibly intense visual environment. The lore context of this specific map is vital to understanding his mindset.
Because it's not just a cool backdrop to him, right?
Right. The sources detail that in the 2005 game, Westopolis is the site of a sudden, catastrophic alien invasion. It is an active, bleeding war zone.
So he's actively choosing to live inside a crisis.
Yes, and crucially, it is the exact moment in the game where the player is forced to make a complex moral choice.
Okay, what kind of choice?
You are dropped into this chaos, and the game asks you, do you help the human military defend the city? Do you side with the invading aliens to actively destroy it? Or do you ignore both factions entirely, fight everyone, and serve your own selfish ends?
Wow. So the map establishes a grim, mature tone immediately.
Exactly. It is a landscape defined entirely by conflict, moral fracture, and apocalyptic stakes. It's not just a backdrop, it is a statement of intent.
So he sets up camp in this digital wasteland. He's just standing there among the burning tanks and toxic vines.
Just minding his own business in the apocalypse.
Right. And into this incredibly bleak, lag-heavy environment pops a portal.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and outstep these players from the public social hubs. The sources describe them so vividly.
They are the pastel-shaded, oversized anime and animal avatars, right?
Yep. Users with names like Mochi Puff and Cuddle Queen XU.
Classic VRChat naming conventions.
Oh, yeah. And the chronicles describe them literally stepping into his instance and holding their virtual nosy.
Holding their noses.
Yeah.
What?
Because the explosion particles in the background of Westopolis are so intense that they are physically making the cafe players' screens vibrate.
Oh, wow. So it's giving them actual VR motion sickness.
Exactly. They are looking around, utterly disgusted by the lack of grass, the lack of flowers, and the aggressive color palette.
This is where we see our first major ideological clash in the sources.
For sure. You have the avatars of the modern, soft social internet colliding head-on with a digital monument to 2000s-era grit.
And the social players view his environment as depressing, broken, and inherently wrong.
Right. The chronicles quote them, telling him that he needs to be saved from this spooky, laggy world.
They literally insist he needs to come back to the Meadow Cafe where there are cozy fireplaces and soft blankets.
Okay, let me pause right there.
Yeah.
Because I was reading this and thinking this dynamic is completely backward.
How so?
Well, it's like you book a weekend at a tranquil, high-end spa retreat, and some guy shows up to the mud bath dressed in full tactile SWAT gear.
Right, which would be terrible behavior.
But this is the exact reverse. They are showing up to his active, burning war zone wearing bathrobes and cucumber masks, and then they have the nerve to complain about the smoke.
That is a very accurate way to frame it.
It really made me ask, is he trying to ruin their fun by being so abrasive? Or are they aggressively invading his sanctuary?
According to the sources, he wasn't bothering anyone.
Exactly. They saw his name on the public social tab, saw that he was in a weird map, and actively decided he needed fixing.
That is the core tension of digital sociology that the critical essays in our stack highlight.
What did the essays say about that specifically?
Well, they point out that in these virtual spaces, there is a pervasive, unspoken assumption of communal accessibility.
Meaning everyone assumes they're allowed everywhere.
Exactly. The cafe players believe that because he is an Eevee, a traditionally cute, wholesome, globally recognized Pokemon, he implicitly belongs to their culture.
So they see the avatar and make an assumption.
Right.
Yeah.
They view his isolation and his choice of environment not as a deliberate, autonomous choice, but as a cry for help.
So they diagnose him with having some sort of temporary edgy phase.
Yes, a phase that they think they can cure if they just force enough socialization and virtual head pats upon him.
But they completely misread him.
Yeah.
Because the aesthetic of Westopolis is just the staging ground.
The friction absolutely explodes when we look at the physical avatar inhabiting this digital wasteland.
Right. Because despite being an Eevee, he does not look or act anything like Mokupuff.
Not at all. He utilizes a small Eevee model, possessing all the classic biological proportions.
Like the large ears, the fluffy collar, the small paws.
Yes, but he has systematically stripped away all of the expected behavioral cuteness.
The sources analyze his animation programming, right?
They do. His idle animation isn't a playful sway or a cute ear twitch. It is a rigid, watchful, entirely neutral pose, grounded firmly on the cracked asphalt.
And his communication style is just as abrasive. When he speaks, he refuses to use voice chat.
And he also refuses to use the standard, clean, rounded VRChat font bubbles that everyone else uses.
Oh man, his text bubbles. When he types, his text appears floating above his head in a bleeding, crimson, jagged horror font.
It looks like it was ripped off a Halloween movie poster.
Oh, and we can't forget the most jarring detail of his avatar.
A weapon.
Yes, he carries a low-poly military-grade assault rifle magnetically attached to his back at all times.
The critical essays in our source material provide a truly brilliant psychological framework for understanding this specific avatar design.
Yeah, one author compares EeveeFan05 to a walking identity crisis from the Mega Man franchise.
Specifically, they draw a direct analogy to the characters bass and treble from the classic Capcom series.
Wait, you have to explain that to me because that is a deep lore cut, and I want to make sure I fully grasp the comparison.
Absolutely. So, in the deep lore of the Mega Man universe, the villain, Dr. Wily, creates a robot named Bass.
What?
Bass is designed to be a hyper-arrogant, incredibly powerful, and highly antagonistic rival to the hero Mega Man. Bass is essentially defined by his ego.
Got it. And who is Treble?
Accompanying Bass is Treble, which is his fierce, robotic, deeply loyal wolf dog companion.
Okay, so a boy and his evil robotic dog.
Right. And what the essayist argues is that EeveeFan05 has essentially stitched these two distinct entities into a single 3-foot-tall fox plushie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he has adopted the biology of Treble, but the personality of Bass.
The Treble biology. That part of the essay really clicked for me when I read about how he handles physical interaction.
The physical boundaries in VR are fascinating here.
They really are.
Yeah.
Because in VRChat, there's this weird, almost immutable cultural law regarding hitboxes in physics.
Right, if you have a small avatar, the larger human-sized avatars will constantly pick you up, hold you, or carry you around.
Exactly. It's treated as a default social interaction for small avatars.
But the chronicles show that EeveeFan05 violently refuses to be picked up.
Yeah, if a larger avatar reaches for him, he immediately brandishes the assault rifle.
He insists that he walks on his own 4 feet. He has custom animations where he snaps rigidly to his vehicles.
He doesn't act like a pet. He behaves exactly like a mechanized, feral attack dog. That's the Treble biology.
Precisely. And then you layer on the Bass personality.
Right, the ego.
Yes. Bass, as a character, is defined by his insufferable, hyper-isolated ego. He is obsessively driven to prove that he is the ultimate creation, and he looks down on everyone else as inferior.
And EeveeFan05 exhibits this exact same psychological trait.
Fully. When the cafe players try to talk to him or coddle him, he doesn't just ignore them.
No, the chronicles record him typing in his jagged red font, literally telling them that their community is a playground for infants.
Infants who beg for head pats like subservient dogs while he actually plays to win.
That is just so aggressive.
Yes.
And we have to talk about his vehicle, too, because it completely cements that mechanized Treble aesthetic.
Oh, the motorcycle.
Yes. When he moves around Westopolis, he doesn't just run. He rides this thing called the Dark Rider.
And this isn't just a random digital asset he found on a 3D modeling site. The sources confirm it is a masterpiece of deep gaming lore.
Right. So what exactly is the Dark Rider?
It is Shadow the Hedgehog's iconic personal motorcycle. In the recent game, Sonic X Shadow Generations, it appears as this incredibly heavy, cruiser-style military vehicle.
Complete with white machine guns nested right over the dual exhaust pipes, right?
Exactly. But what the sources highlight to ground this in reality is a fascinating real-world crossover.
I love this part of the source.
Yeah, to celebrate the game's release, Sega actually commissioned the building of a physical, fully operational 9-foot 7-inch version of this exact chopper.
That is massive.
It is. And they they debuted it at the 2024 MotoGP in Austin, Texas.
A real, physical, nearly 10-foot-long motorcycle with machine guns on the exhaust.
Yep.
An E405 rides the exact digital one-to-one equivalent of that beast through a burning city as a 3-foot-tall Eevee.
The visual contrast is almost comical.
The irony of his avatar choice is just staggering to me.
Yeah.
Because if you look at Pokemon lore, an Eevee is literally defined by its genetic instability.
Right. Its entire gimmick is its ability to adapt and evolve into absolutely anything.
It can become water, fire, electric, dark, fairy. It is the ultimate blank canvas.
And yet, EeveeFan05 intentionally chose the symbol of boundless potential and locked it into the most rigid, unyielding, mechanized, aggressive form possible.
If we step back and analyze that choice, it represents a profound statement on digital autonomy, right?
Absolutely. The essayists point out that in an environment like VRChat, where fluidity, shape-shifting, and constant reinvention are the absolute norm, rigidity actually becomes the ultimate form of rebellion.
So by refusing to change, he's protesting the culture.
Yes. By taking the platform's most adaptable avatar and forcing it into a state of permanent aggressive stasis, he is broadcasting a complete structural rejection of the community's core ethos.
He is basically saying, I have the power to change, and I absolutely refuse to.
Exactly.
And it's vital to understand that this isn't just a cosplay for him.
Oh, no. He has the skills to back it up.
He doesn't just look intimidating to scare people away so he can brood in peace. He actually backs up the edgy posturing with terrifying, hyper-competitive action.
Which brings us to the most explosive event in the Chronicles, the Battle of the Colliders.
This is the moment the cafe players finally decide they've had enough of his attitude, right?
Yes. They decide they need to teach him a lesson in humility.
So how does this battle start?
Well, the narrative chronicles detail an encounter where Cuddle Queen Uxu, one of the giant anime avatars, gets her pride deeply wounded.
Right, she attempts to pick him up like a toy, and he points his low-poly assault rifle directly at her head.
So she challenges him. She invites him to leave Westopolis and join her in a highly optimized, heavily scripted competitive PvP map called the Shattered Steel Arena.
But she isn't planning to fight him herself, is she?
No. She brings in a ringer. She brings her virtual boyfriend, a user named XSlayerX.
Oh man, XSlayerX. The sources paint a very clear picture of this guy.
He seems like a very intense player.
He does. He plays as a glowing, high-fidelity cyber ninja, and he is utilizing thousands of dollars worth of hardware.
The hardware setup is crucial here.
Yeah, he has full-body tracking, so his legs and waist move perfectly in the game, and he's using a physical weighted gun stock in the real world to steady his virtual aim.
So they intend to drag the grumpy Eevee into an arena where pure social clout doesn't matter and publicly humiliate him through combat.
That was the plan. But there is a crucial detail they miss until it is too late.
Right before the match begins, Mochi Puff, the other cafe player, actually checks the public API leaderboards for these specific Battle Royale worlds.
And what does she find?
The sources reveal she finds out that EeveeFan05 isn't just hanging around. He has over 3,000 first-place wins and maintains a staggering 98% win-to-loss ratio.
That is insane. He is not a role player. He is a lethal, highly conditioned digital combatant.
He really is.
I just need to understand how that is physically possible. I mean, how does a 3-foot-tall plushie beat a cyber ninja with a physical gun stock?
It comes down to a deep understanding of the platform's mechanical physics.
Okay, walk me through it.
The ensuing battle in the Shattered Steel Arena is described in the Chronicles as a fascinating display of raw mechanical skill, completely dismantling expensive hardware and social posturing.
So the ninja jumps in thinking his gear will save him.
Right. The cyber ninja, XSlayerX, jumps into the arena relying on his full-body tracking and his flashy avatar. But EeveeFan05 moves with a speed and erraticism that completely defies the standard locomotion systems of the platform.
The sources note he is utilizing techniques like strafe jumping and low-profile sliding.
Yes, and most importantly, an exploit the community calls play-space moving.
Okay, stop right there. What exactly is play-space moving? Because the Chronicles mention it constantly, and I need to know how it works in the context of VR physics.
It's a bit technical, but play-space moving is a highly controversial movement mechanic in VRChat.
Controversial how?
Well, in VR, your headset tracks your physical movement within a designated area in your real room, your play space. Normally, you use your thumbstick to move your avatar across the map.
Right, like a normal video game.
But with play space moving, a user binds a software override to their controllers. By holding a button and physically waving their arms, they can literally grab the digital space around them and drag their entire real-world coordinate system through the digital air.
Wait, so they were just pulling themselves through the air with their hands?
Exactly. It allows a player to float, clip through the floor, dodge bullets in midair, and move with a jarring, instantaneous speed that the game engine's standard physics were never designed to handle or predict.
That is insane. So he's essentially hacking the physical coordinates of the room.
Pretty much.
The Chronicles describe this one specific moment in the fight that just blew my mind.
The sniper shot.
Yes. So the Cyber Ninja is spraying an automatic rifle at him. EeveeFan05 executes a flawless, low-profile physical roll under the line of fire.
An actual physical roll in his room.
Yes, but here is the genius part. He intentionally triggers his Eevee avatar's natural, pre-programmed tailspin animation.
Wow. To hide his movement.
Exactly. He uses the visual clutter of the fluffy tail spinning to completely mask the actual physical movements of his hand controllers.
That is incredibly tactical.
It is. The ninja loses track of his hands, and EeveeFan05 lands a backward sniper headshot, instantly eliminating him.
It's an absolute bloodbath.
And when the match ends, the Cyber Ninja is predictably furious.
Of course. He accuses EeveeFan05 of using an aimbot or illegal cheat software.
But the Chronicles reveal EeveeFan05's ultimate secret here. He types in his jagged red font above his head. "It's called physical tracking, kid. I don't use a desk. I run on a slip mill."
A physical slip mill.
A physical slip mill. I had to look into what this actually entails, and it changes everything about how we view his dedication.
Yeah, explain the slip mill for us.
For those who aren't familiar with hardcore VR hardware, an omnidirectional slip mill is a massive piece of physical equipment.
It's essentially a concave treadmill you install in your living room, right?
Yeah, you strap yourself into a waist harness, you put on specialized low-friction shoes, and you physically have to run, sprint, duck, and slide in the real world to make your avatar move in the game.
So he isn't sitting in a gaming chair flicking a thumbstick.
No. He is literally sweating. He is exerting massive cardiovascular energy and physical stamina for hours just to operate this tiny Eevee.
This revelation raises an incredibly important debate within the source material about the nature of play in digital spaces.
Right, because not everyone respects that level of effort.
Exactly. Several of the critical essays contain a harsh critique labeling him a sweat lord.
A sweat lord.
Yeah. They condemn him for taking a casual, primarily social platform and treating it like an elite esports tournament.
They think he's trying too hard.
They argue that he is exploiting his reduced hitbox because a 3-foot Eevee presents a mathematically smaller target than a 6-foot human, and pairing it with try-hard, physically exhausting mechanics just to bully casual players who are simply trying to relax.
I am going to firmly push back on that specific critique because it feels incredibly hypocritical based on the timeline of events.
How so?
The cafe players challenged him. They were the ones who brought him into an arena specifically designed for high-stakes gunplay.
That is true. They issued the challenge.
If you bring a slip mill, extreme cardio conditioning, and esports-level tactical tracking into a casual social game, yeah, you are essentially bringing a Formula One car to a local go-kart track.
Right.
But he didn't drive it onto their track. He was minding his own business, parked in the garage of Westopolis.
He really was just standing there.
They dragged the F1 car out into the street, demanded a race, and then cried foul when it ran them over.
That is a very fair assessment of the sequence of events. He did not initiate the combat. He merely finished it with brutal, uncompromising efficiency.
Zigzags.
But his dedication to the slip mill highlights a much deeper philosophical stance. He demands friction. He demands stakes.
That's a great point.
The cafe players want the illusion of movement with the flick of a thumbstick. They want the reward without the effort. EeveeFan05 demands the physical reality of exertion. He wants his virtual actions to have a real-world physical cost.
And what's brilliant is how seamlessly that connects to the rest of his identity.
It really is all connected.
Because this intense, uncompromising standard doesn't just apply to his combat mechanics or how he dodges virtual bullets.
No, that same demand for friction permeates every single piece of media, culture, and even the simulated food he consumes.
The sources show that he operates his entire personality like a heavily fortified vault of opinions.
Which naturally leads us to the subsequent interactions detailed in the Chronicles.
What happens after the battle?
Well, once word of the hyper-lethal, grumpy Eevee spreads across the servers, Players begin flocking to his instance of Westopolis.
Oh, so he becomes like a tourist attraction.
Basically. But they don't come to fight him anymore. They come to interrogate him. They basically treat him like a hostile interview subject.
They are desperately trying to find a crack in his armor.
Right. They assume that underneath all the posturing, there has to be something soft, something relatable, or something mainstream that he enjoys.
So they start probing his cultural tastes.
They do. They ask him about his favorite era of Sonic the Hedgehog, assuming he'll pick something universally beloved.
Like the classic Genesis era or something.
Instead, he fiercely, almost militantly, defends the early to mid-2000s era.
The exact era that birthed Westopolis.
Yes. He tells them he respects the dark tones, the mild swearing, the introduction of firearms into a platformer, and the fact that the villains weren't just cartoon doctors, but actual world-ending cosmic deities.
He talks about the high-stakes existential threats and tragic anti-heroes like Shadow.
And conversely, the sources note his absolute venomous disdain for the 2010s era of the Sonic franchise.
Oh, he hates the newer stuff.
Passionately. He critiques the shift toward a lighthearted, episodic Saturday morning cartoon tone.
He calls it a terrible, cowardly corporate decision that stripped the franchise of its backbone.
He argues that if you have a mascot whose entire identity is built around speed and attitude, that character intrinsically demands a mature, high-octane, high-stakes world to inhabit.
And he applies that exact same rigid logic to anime.
Anime is a huge cultural touchstone in VRChat.
Oh, massive. So the players try to find common ground by asking if he likes the cozy, immensely popular slice-of-life shows like Spy X Family.
A very safe, wholesome choice.
Right. But the chronicles say he responds by hitting a button on his avatar to start blaring aggressive J-rock music.
Of course he has a dedicated soundboard button for that.
Naturally. And then he delivers this intense, hyper-detailed, almost breathless plot summary of the anime Kill la Kill.
The thematic resonance of that specific choice is staggering.
Tell me more about Kill la Kill, because I'm only slightly familiar with it.
For context, Kill la Kill is an incredibly aggressive, high-octane anime. He describes to the horrified cafe players a show entirely about revenge. Sentient uniforms that literally drink the wearer's blood to function, dismantling alien threats, and fighting a cosmic matriarch. Sentient blood-drinking uniforms. That is wild!
It is, but the core theme of the show is about clothing as a mechanism of control. And in VRChat, your avatar is your clothing.
Oh, wow. I didn't even put that together.
Yeah, he tells the cafe players that the show is fundamentally about shedding the skin that society forces you to wear and violently fighting to carve your own path.
It is a direct metaphor for his refusal to wear the cute personality they were trying to force onto his Eevee avatar.
Precisely. He uses his media consumption as an ideological shield.
Even his takes on food, virtual or otherwise, are heavily curated.
You'd think food preferences wouldn't matter in a digital space.
You would think. But the sources show he uses them as profound metaphorical boundaries.
When the crowd asks about fast food, he violently rejects McDonald's.
He states, on the record, that eating there costs your dignity.
He calls their menu bloated, soft, and uninspired. He also goes out of his way to state his absolute visceral hatred for spinach.
Spinach. Just so random. But his preferred alternatives are highly revealing. He states that he favors Wendy's, specifically praising the brand's smug, combative internet attitude.
And he praises the physical structure of their food, too. He admires their square patties, calling them Minecraft-like.
He respects the ethos that they refuse to cut corners, both literally and metaphorically.
Oh, that's clever. But his ultimate loyalty lies with Whataburger.
The Texas chain.
Yes, he goes off on this deep lore tangent about its Texas heritage. He praises the massive 5-inch toasted buns, the sheer volume of the food, and their proprietary fancy ketchup.
He tells the crowd that Whataburger is for people who actually have places to be, who need fuel for real-world exertion.
Unlike the cafe players who just sit around sipping fake digital tea all day.
And he also aggressively defends eating a minimalist pineapple-only pizza from Peter Piper Pizza.
Pineapple-only pizza. That is just designed to make people mad.
It really is. But what is genuinely fascinating about this specific fast food debate is the bizarre geopolitical clash that erupts from it.
Oh, right, the Japanese servers incident.
Yes. According to the chronicles, a massive crowd of players, noted in the sources as primarily hailing from Japanese servers, portals into Westopolis.
They hear his passionate defense of Texas fast food, and they decide to try and insult him by attacking his real-world home state.
And we need to impartially report exactly what the sources say happened here because it highlights how strangely disconnected internet arguments can become.
We do. So the crowd starts yelling at him, but their insults are based entirely on wildly exaggerated, media-muddled stereotypes of America and Texas.
They genuinely ask him if he rides around on a horse shooting guns into the air, if he keeps a pet bald eagle, and if he wears a 10-gallon hat indoors.
And bizarrely, they ask if he worships a giant green woman holding a torch, completely conflating Texas with the Statue of Liberty in New York.
The chronicles note that the insults even escalate into historical tragedies.
Yeah, the crowd attempts to weaponize geopolitics, mocking the United States over the events of Pearl Harbor and the September 11th attacks.
They are attempting to frame his country as inherently violent, chaotic, and fundamentally unprotected. They are trying to elicit an emotional, angry response from him.
And how does EeveeFan05, the guy who fights cyber ninjas on a slit mill, react to a crowd of pastel avatars screaming at him about 9/11 and bald eagles?
He is completely, utterly stoic.
The chronicles describe him calmly reaching into his digital menu. He spawns a high-resolution digital Whataburger cup.
He rests it on the dashboard of his massive motorcycle.
And he simply tells them that they clearly get their entire worldview from cheap television and cartoons.
He dismisses their barrage of insults with a single cutting line.
He says, "My world has stakes, my world has grit, and my real world has better burgers than whatever you're eating."
And then he just revs his engine and drives off into a cloud of simulated exhaust.
It is a masterful display of psychological boundary maintenance.
He absolutely refuses to engage with their emotional volatility.
He treats their geopolitical insults with the exact same detached, clinical disdain that he treats their pastel aesthetics.
He refuses to let them set the terms of the engagement.
When I look at all of these interactions,
Hmm.
the games, the anime, the food, the stoicism, he's acting like a cultural sommelier.
Yes, but only for the most chaotic, aggressive, and highly specific things.
Exactly. He is building his identity like a fortress, brick by brick, and he only lets in the things that reinforce his armor.
That is the perfect analogy. He is fortifying his digital self.
And it is precisely this hyper-specific, unyielding curation that eventually brings him into direct, unavoidable conflict with the VRChat community's most deeply held philosophical tenets.
We are moving from aesthetic disagreements into what the sources refer to as the pronoun and pedigree wars.
Right. This is where the tension shifts from being about what games he likes to being deeply, uncomfortably personal.
The crowd in Westopolis realizes they can't break him with gameplay, and they can't break him with insults.
So they decide they need to categorize him. They try to fit him into their social boxes.
They ask for his pronouns.
Now, the community desperately wants him to use neutral pronouns. They look at the Eevee avatar and they see a flexible, gender-neutral mascot.
To them, it is a blank slate explicitly designed for personal projection.
The sociological concept of the blank slate is crucial here, isn't it?
It is. The academic essays in our sources point out that in VR communities, applying a strict traditional binary gender to a base form, non-humanoid avatar is often viewed as arbitrary.
More than that, it is seen as a regression of the platform's fluid social ethos.
Right, the community values the ability to be formless. But EeveeFan05 vehemently, aggressively refuses to play along. He insists on strict he/him pronouns.
He doesn't just insist on the pronouns. He philosophically rejects their premise.
The chronicles quote him telling the crowd, "I am not your canvas. I am not here to be a flexible, gender-neutral mascot for your social experiments."
And he doesn't stop there. He actively demands masculine honorifics.
He forces the crowd to address him using titles like Dark Prince, Judge, and the Spanish Señor.
The crowd's reaction is deeply revealing here.
They view these titles as archaic. They see it as a rigid, toxic power fantasy.
They're profoundly offended by the inherent hierarchy implied by a title like Dark Prince.
But EeveeFan05 diagnoses the root of their outrage with incredible precision.
He tells them they aren't bothered by the words themselves. They are bothered because the titles imply that he is not their equal and he is not their soft-edged companion.
He delivers a line that perfectly encapsulates his worldview.
You hate that I'm a man because you've spent so long pretending that labels don't matter, only to realize that when someone actually picks one, it offends your entire worldview.
That is such a heavy rejection of the blank slate ideology.
He is telling them that true choice includes the choice to be rigid.
And when they realize they can't win the ideological battle on pronouns, they pivot to something even more absurd.
They try astrology.
They somehow find out that his real-world birthday is March 1st.
which makes him a Pisces.
Hmm.
Immediately, the crowd brands him a toxic Pisces.
They accuse him of emotional volatility. They claim he has a desperate need for drama.
And they argue that he is merely manifesting the dark side of his water sign by choosing to live in a gloomy, ruined city.
And once again, his response is incredibly sharp. He doesn't deny the astrological sign. He simply flips the script and redefines it to serve his narrative.
He tells them that Pisces is not about being a soft water sign. It is a sign of deep, crushing ocean currents and the absolute end of the astrological cycle.
He tells them, I am the culmination, not the beginner. And you're just shallow water, terrified of anything deeper than your own reflection.
The guy just does not miss a beat. He takes every single weapon they throw at him, geopolitics, astrology, social norms, and turns it right back around.
They even try to test his aesthetic preferences one last time by asking him what his ideal Pokeball would be to live inside.
They are clearly hoping he'll say a luxury ball or a heal ball, something cozy.
He rejects the premise entirely and chooses the Master Ball. Pure, unyielding dominance. Pure function. Absolutely no soft edges.
But the ultimate cultural heresy, the moment detailed in the Chronicles that truly shatters the crowd's worldview, is his take on the Pokemon anime itself.
They ask him to align himself with either Ash Ketchum, the eternal protagonist, or Gary Oak, the arrogant rival.
To the community, Ash Ketchum is the universal constant. He is the pure-hearted hero of their collective childhood memories, a symbol of perseverance and emotional bonding.
And EeveeFan05 absolutely eviscerates the legacy of Ash Ketchum.
He doesn't just dislike him, he views him as a systemic failure.
He calls Ash a symbol of wasted potential and endless cycles of mediocrity.
He complains about how, for 25 years, Ash would constantly forget basic battle strategies, reset his progress, and fumble his way through encounters.
He tells the crowd that when Ash finally retired from the anime, a moment that legitimately made millions of people cry on the internet, he felt nothing but total, absolute indifference.
Instead, he pledges his complete ideological loyalty to the arrogant rival, Gary Oak.
He praises Gary's intellect. He praises his reliance on strategy over the power of friendship.
He respects Gary's canonical evolution into a mature, serious Pokemon researcher.
And he specifically points out Gary's choice to evolve his Eevee into an Umbreon, a dark type, over Ash's reliance on a base form Pikachu.
EeveeFan05 boldly declares to the server that the true protagonist of the anime, the only one who actually learned and grew, was Gary Oak.
The Chronicles describe a collective, horrified gasp from the crowd when he says this. To them, Gary Oak is an unredeemed, arrogant bully.
Which really made me stop and wonder about his motivations.
What do you mean?
I have to ask, is EeveeFan05 praising Gary Oak because he actually likes the character's arc? Or is he simply self-aware enough to know that praising the community's most despised, arrogant rival is the sharpest possible psychological weapon he can wield against them?
Does he love Gary, or does he just love how much they hate Gary?
Yeah, exactly.
It is highly likely a synthesis of both. Based on his actions, Gary Oak represents a meritocracy of strategy and tangible linear goals.
These are traits EeveeFan05 clearly values, as evidenced by his grueling hours on the slip mill and his battle royal records.
He hates the 25-year loop of Ash Ketchum because it represents the same loop he sees in VRChat, people standing in front of digital mirrors, making no progress, just existing.
But choosing Gary is also a deliberate, calculated strike against the community's demand for emotional vulnerability.
He intentionally chooses the path of the uncompromising winner over the path of the emotional journey.
And this absolute rejection of their heroes leads us directly to the ultimate, terrifying climax of the Chronicles.
The crowd is exhausted. They challenge him to show them what kind of world he actually wants.
If he hates their cafés and he hates their heroes, they ask him, if you had the godlike power to rewrite gaming history right now, who would you delete from existence and who would you keep?
This event is logged in the sources as the Great Deletion.
EeveeFan05 responds by projecting a massive, towering hologram into the digital smog of Westopolis, written in his signature bleeding red horror font.
It is not a haphazard list. It is a surgical, deeply ideological dissection of gaming history.
Let's look at the deleted column first. It is an absolute bloodbath of joy.
He systematically erases the most cheerful, mainstream, soft icons in existence.
He deletes Mario. He deletes Luigi. Pikachu, Pichu, Raichu, entire evolutionary lines. Gone.
He deletes Isabelle from Animal Crossing. He deletes the entire main flock of angry birds.
He deletes Hatsune Miku, the ultimate virtual pop idol. He even throws in Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy for good measure.
The list of the deleted is a systematic erasure of the soft, the colorful, and the globally beloved.
He is removing any character designed to evoke warmth, universal appeal, or passive comfort.
He is purging the digital landscape of its safety nets.
But the list of who he keeps this is where we have to really dig into the psychology, because it's a wildly specific mix of 2000s edge, pure villainy, and incredibly niche character variants.
He keeps Ganondorf. He keeps Sephiroth. He keeps Ridley and Dark Samus from Metroid.
He keeps Master Chief, Solid Snake, and Conquer the Hungover, Cynical Squirrel from Bad Fur Day.
The villains and the soldiers make sense given his aesthetic, but what stands out to you about the specific exceptions he makes?
Because the sources provide a list of highly granular, almost bizarrely specific caveats to who survives his purge.
Right, the exceptions are the craziest part.
He says he will keep the tactician characters from Super Smash Bros. And Fire Emblem Byleth, Robin, and Corrin, but strictly their female versions.
He keeps the Wii Fit trainer, but strictly the male version.
He keeps Sora from Kingdom Hearts, but strictly the black and white, rubber hose, animated Timeless River iteration.
He keeps Yoshi, but only the black variant from Yoshi's Story.
Let's analyze this. Why these specific versions?
Let's break down the psychological reasoning behind these choices, because they aren't random. Take the Fire Emblem tactician.
Okay, why only the females?
In gaming culture, the male versions of Byleth or Robin are often viewed as generic, blank slate self-inserts for the player.
Right, they're meant to be you.
The female versions, however, are often embraced by the community for having more distinct, aggressive, or unapologetic character designs.
So by keeping the female versions, he is rejecting the everyman placeholder in favor of a defined, sharp aesthetic.
That makes total sense. And what about the male Wii Fit trainer?
The gaming community, especially the anime-adjacent community, absolutely adores the female Wii Fit trainer. They treat her like a soft digital waifu.
By specifically keeping the male version, he is violently subverting that entire culture.
He is choosing the sterile, unyielding, entirely non-sexualized fitness instructor.
He is choosing the version that offers zero comfort and only demands physical exertion, which perfectly mirrors his use of the physical slip mill.
Precisely. And look at Timeless River Sora.
Sora is usually a beacon of colorful Disney magic optimism covered in modern anime zippers and spikes.
The Timeless River version strips all of that away. It reduces the character to a gritty 1920s monochrome rubber hose aesthetic.
It removes the fluff and leaves only the stark contrast of black and white.
And Black Yoshi. In the original Yoshi story game, the Black Yoshi is a secret, highly coveted variant.
And its main mechanical difference is that it can eat absolutely anything in the game, including the spikiest, most bitter, poisonous enemies that the brightly colored Yoshis refuse to touch.
He is literally choosing the variant defined by its ability to consume and survive toxicity.
The crowd in Westopolis reads this list, and they are utterly speechless.
They accuse him of being intensely hostile, of leaving absolutely no joy or light in the world.
But the chronicles note that he views this deletion not as disruption, but as a necessary refinement.
He states, "I don't need a world bloated with cheerful mascots designed to sell plush toys to children. I delete the filler, and I keep the edge."
He acts like a digital bouncer at the most exclusive, hostile, and miserable nightclub in gaming history.
He isn't just cutting the fat, he is actively declaring war on the very concept of passive joy. He's replacing it with shadows, villains, and unyielding grit.
When we synthesize all of these interactions, critiques, and philosophical stances, EeveeFan05 emerges as the ultimate childhood trauma generator of the metaverse.
He is a walking, breathing lexicon of defiance.
He takes terms that the internet uses as insults, edgelord, defiant, despicable, try-hard, sweatlord, and he forges them into an impenetrable suit of armor.
He single-handedly turns a pastel, escapist social space into a psychological battleground.
He demands that players who are desperately trying to avoid friction are violently confronted by it.
It is such a wild, exhausting ride. And for you listening, I think it serves as a stark, somewhat uncomfortable reminder of how incredibly easy it is to fall into the pressure of conforming to online spaces.
We all want to fit into the Meadow Cafe. We all want the digital head pats.
We naturally adapt our online personas to avoid friction and gain acceptance.
But EeveeFan05 represents the terrifying, awe-inspiring extreme of total digital autonomy.
He is the living proof that just because the digital world wants you to be soft, and just because the platform gives you the tools to blend in, it doesn't mean you have to surrender your edges.
He is a digital monument to the absolute refusal to compromise.
The true takeaway here, The core sociological insight is that in an era of infinite digital fluidity, true rebellion is not about changing your shape.
True rebellion in a boundless metaverse is about choosing strict boundaries and defending them to the death.
But that exact rigidity leaves us with a profound, lingering paradox.
Exactly.
And that is what I want to leave you with today. A final thought to mull over as you navigate your own digital spaces.
Let's hear it.
In a virtual reality metaverse where you are handed the godlike power to be absolutely anything, where your identity can be entirely fluid, formless, and totally boundless, does choosing to be a rigidly defined, immovable, aggressively masculine object make EeveeFan05’s the most truly authentic person on the grid? Or does it make him the most deeply trapped by his own armor?